One of the most classic comic book tropes is the team-up. Usually the two characters meet each other, misunderstand each other's intentions, and come to blows before eventually banding together to defeat a common enemy. Batman and the gang of meddling kids from Mystery Incorporated actually have quite a long history together, teaming up during the days when Batman cartoons and Scooby-Doo cartoons were both being made by Hanna-Barbera for the odd animated special. Years later, this pairing would make its way into the pages of the comics, with the Dark Knight going on several adventures with the gang. It makes a certain kind of sense. I mean, Batman and the gang are all detectives, so they have a lot of intersecting interests. The comic book series also does a good job of going with a more Silver Agey take on Batman, so there isn't as much of a clash in tone when Batman pulls Scooby snacks out of his utility belt. But there is still something kind of strange about the idea that Batman would get so stumped on a case that he would call in not another detective hero like, say, Barry Allen, but would go straight to a bunch of teenage jazz cabbage enthusiasts who live in a van with their dog. Number 9. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Ghostbusters. When Donatello of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles created an interspatial teleportation unit, he asked his brothers Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Raphael to help him test the device's capabilities. They go through the portal with their friends April O'Neil and Casey Jones and discover that the device has transported them to a different New York, the one featured in the Ghostbusters universe. They are immediately put face to face with an evil ghost who of course is immune to their attacks and captures and possesses Casey. Thankfully, they are soon saved by everyone's favorite group of paranormal exterminators, Venkman, Winston, Egon, and Ray, the Ghostbusters. The two groups team up and the combination works better than you might expect. There's a certain joy to seeing Venkman start to get on Raph's nerves, while Winston and Leonardo bond over how difficult it is to be the most normal one on a team. Plus, seeing Leonardo swap his bow staff for a proton pack is something I never knew I always wanted to see. Number 8. Superman and Muhammad Ali. This one is perhaps the most iconic of the weird team-ups ever put to panel. One day, Muhammad Ali is in Metropolis playing basketball with some local kids, and Lois, Jimmy, and Clark set out to get an interview with him. Just as they are about to begin their interview, an alien shows up and requests the greatest champion of Earth to fight in an alien boxing match. He has an armada of ships and is going to blow up Earth if they don't accept the challenge. Clark excuses himself and Superman shows up offering to fight. Ali retorts that he will fight the aliens as he is the greatest fighter on Earth. Superman points out that that is a stupid plan because he's, you know, Superman, but Ali reminds him that he's, you know, Muhammad Ali. The alien tells them that they will fight and the winner will face the alien champion. Ali and Superman go to the Fortress of Solitude to train, and Ali teaches Supes some of his moves before they are interrupted by the aliens, who inform them that the fight will take place on their homeworld, which has a red sun, meaning Superman won't have any powers. Ali points out that Superman is in serious trouble. The two have a boxing match, and Ali KOs Superman after a few rounds and goes on to fight the alien champion. It turns out that Superman and Ali fixed the fight, and while Ali fights, Superman is taking out the alien fleet. Ali wins the match and the Earth is saved. Later on Earth, Ali reveals that he has figured out Superman's secret identity, and the two shake hands as Ali declares, "Superman, we are the greatest." It's a weird story and kinda goofy, but it has become such a classic, and the dynamic between Superman and Muhammad Ali is actually so well done that it is worth reading. Number 7. The Avengers meet David Letterman. In Avengers number 239, Wonder Man is having a bit of a problem. He has been trying to make it as an actor, but it hasn't been working out. His agent is aware of his status as a reserve Avenger and books Wonder Man on David Letterman, claiming that he will be accompanied by some of the other Avengers. Wonder Man reaches out to Vision, who arranges for himself, Black Panther, Hawkeye, Beast, and Black Widow to join Wonder Man on the late-night talk show appearance. The villain, Fabian Stanowitz, otherwise known as the Meccano Marauder, sees the promo and decides that he will also be attending. The Avengers go on the show, and Dave interviews the group, getting the bombshell that Beast is leaving the Avengers to start the Defenders, but the interview is interrupted by an attack from Fabian's machines, while Paul Schaefer keeps the band playing to keep the crowd from panicking. Fabian sits down for an interview with Letterman, surrounding them with a force field so they won't be interrupted by the Avengers or the machines. Dave then uses his classic giant doorknob prop to knock out the villain, saving the day. Wonder Man is thrilled that his heroic exploits will be shown on television, but when the show is set to air, it is interrupted by a special news bulletin and no one gets to see it. Number 6. The X-Men meet the crew of the Enterprise. Captain's log. Stardate 4740.5. The crew of the Enterprise came across an odd alien ship. They scanned it for life and saw that it was carrying 7 life forms that sensors indicated were near human. Before more information could be gathered, the ship exploded, and a giant creature calling himself the Gladiator appeared and punched the Enterprise. As the engineer, Mr. Scott, attempted to repair the damage to the shields, a group of stowaways who had beamed off the destroyed ship at the last moment came aboard. They called themselves the X-Men. So the X-Men had set off to save the galaxy and were now hiding on the Enterprise, very confused as to how they had ended up in the future. Gambit was injured and Beast took him to the ship's sickbay to find treatment. It was here that Dr. McCoy met Dr. McCoy. The remaining X-Men were discovered by Mr. Spock, who incapacitated Wolverine with the Vulcan nerve pinch and took the team to meet Captain Kirk so they could work together to defeat the villains. This is a fun story filled with some cool moments like the aforementioned Spock and Wolverine fight, as well as some fun character moments like Kirk trying to hit on Jean Grey. But the X-Men and Enterprise crew are an odd pair to pitch together, and the entire affair does feel pretty weird. Number 5. The Punisher meets Slim Shady. Getting into the really weird team-ups, we have the time that Frank Castle met Marshall Mathers. In this story, Eminem is leaving a concert with his security when they come across a strange man in a skull shirt in the alley. They pull their guns on him and get absolutely blown away while M makes a break for it. He's rescued by his childhood friend, the Barracuda, who helps him hide from Castle. When Punisher gets too close, Slim Shady beats him up and shoots him. Barracuda then takes out Eminem, and when he wakes up, he's on a boat tied back to back with the Punisher. Punisher explains that he was trying to protect Eminem and only took out his bodyguards because they pulled guns on him and probably all had rap sheets anyways. Barracuda explains that the Parents Music Council has hired him to kill Shady because they think his music is corrupting the youth. He throws M off the side of the boat, but the water is frozen and he manages to get away. He finds an ice fisherman, takes his chainsaw, and returns to the boat to save the Punisher. After freeing Frank, Punisher leaves Eminem stranded on the ice with a phone to call for help as he sets off to take out the Parents Music Council. After all, hiring a contract killer is a serious crime. What? This book is insane! Not just for the premise, but the fact that the Punisher doesn't do anything except get beaten up and later rescued by Eminem. But it isn't the weirdest Punisher crossover. More on that later. Number 4. Spider-Man and the cast of SNL. Live from New York, it's Spider Day Night Live! Starring Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Jane Curtin, Garrett Morris, Bill Murray, Lorraine Newman, and Gilda Radner. In Marvel Team-Up number 74, Spider-Man got to team up with the classic Saturday Night Live cast in one of the weirdest team-ups in the Wall Crawlers history. Peter and MJ are attending a filming of Saturday Night Live, but little do they know that the show is about to be interrupted by the Silver Samurai, whose magic ring has been sent to John Belushi by accident due to his SNL Samurai character being mistaken for the Silver Samurai. Thugs try to take over the show, but the cast keeps the show going while taking out the thugs with the help of Spider-Man, while the two samurai face off backstage. It is extra weird because the celebrity host is Stan Lee, and the SNL cast are dressing up as Marvel characters. But in a world where Marvel heroes are real, what exactly is Stan Lee famous for? Number 3. Jimmy Olsen and Don Rickles. In Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 141, written by Jack Kirby of all people, Jimmy teams up with the Golden Guardian and Goody Rickles, the superhero who just happens to look like the insult comic and Mr. Potato Head actor Don Rickles. They are poisoned by Intergang and have to find a cure before they explode. They end up at an office where the real Don Rickles is hanging out and just starts slowly going nuts as superhero hijinks take place around him. Eventually the heroes are cured, but Rickles is taken away by the police after claiming that he is going to explode explode in an effort to get away from Jimmy and his gang. It is a difficult story to follow, and wouldn't make this list if it weren't for the weird detail of Don Rickles having a superhero who is not related to him, but is named Goody Rickles and just happens to look exactly like him. That's just all kinds of strange. Number 2, The Punisher meets Archie. In a crossover that started out as a joke between the publishers of the two characters, a criminal who looks remarkably like Archie is being chased by the Punisher. He escapes to Riverdale, and the Punisher pursues him there. Archie is up to his usual hijinks, trying to date both Betty and Veronica, when a bunch of feds, mistaking him for his criminal doppelganger, take him away. They are attacked by the Punisher, who realizes his mistake and goes after the double, who has taken Veronica to the town's sock hop. Punisher goes to the dance and is mistaken for a chaperone by the teachers. Things go off the rails when the villain takes Veronica hostage and a shootout breaks out at the dance. The bad guy gets away with Ronnie, and Archie has to team up with Frank to take him out. Archie starts keeping a war journal, and Frank gets a nice Riverdale sweater as a gift, and together they save Veronica and stop the villain, who they tie to a giant balloon and let fly away, presumably so he will fly into the air and lose oxygen and die. As if all of this wasn't weird enough, the story ends with Professor X informing Wolverine that he has to go after the most dangerous mutant alive, Jughead. Number 1, Green Lantern and Colonel Sanders. Colonel Sanders has shown up in DC Comics stories a few times, having traveled the multiverse and hired Captain Cold and Mirror Master to work in his restaurants. But his weirdest story is when he teamed up with Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern. In this story, the Colonel is working with Ferris Air to test that his new packaging for his Zinger chicken sandwich will protect it for interstellar travel, as he wants to bring his food across the universe. He enlists the help of Green Lantern to help him deliver the food, and Hal agrees. As Hal tells him, every member of the Green Lantern Corps is working on this project. Meaning somewhere a planet is being attacked by Darkseid and the lanterns are delivering chicken sandwiches. The sandwiches are all stolen by the Orange Lantern Larfleeze, and Hal creates a KFC themed Green Lantern ring for the Colonel so they can go after the sandwiches. Sanders attacks Larfleeze with a drumstick construct, and Larfleeze admits that the Zinger chicken sandwich is the only thing that has ever satisfied his unending longing and hunger. Sanders uses his ring to create the first KFC on the planet Okara and lets Larfleeze sign on as a franchisee, assuming that the Orange Lantern can complete the training program to get his cooking to the Colonel's strict standards. This book is so weird. It's like those old Twinkie ads where Flash would defeat Weather Wizard with the delicious taste of Hostess Twinkie cakes, but instead of being one page long, it's the entire comic. It's so weird.
Number 10, Frogman. Less of a team up, more of a put up with. Spider-Man and Frogman can be seen teaming up in the pages of Marvel Team Up Volume 1, Issue 131. The two reluctantly join forces to take down the White Rabbit. Most of this team up involves Spider-Man trying to get Frogman to stay out of trouble and out of his way. Frogman is actually Eugene, the son of former villain Leapfrog. In fact, Eugene even reuses his dad's costume. He and Spider-Man do end up stopping White Rabbit with the help of his dad, who Eugene thought was working for her but who is secretly working undercover for the cops. Aw yeah. In the end, the reward money for her capture gets split up and everything ends up happily ever after for everybody. Eugene even gets to feel like a bona fide hero. Aww. Number 9, Red Sonja. Typical Peter has to cancel a date with MJ when the Daily Bugle needs staff to cover the pandemonium ensuing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But she sneakily tags along. And when Parker transforms into Spider-Man and gets stuck in a scuffle, a sword calls out to MJ and transforms her into Red Sonja. Akin to what happened to MJ, another soul has been possessed by the evil dark wizard Kulan Ga, and the two must team up to defeat him. Fortunately, they do, and Red Sonja stops possessing MJ, who faints into Spidey's arms. Gosh, do I love this MJ/Red Sonja mashup. I feel like I need to add Red Sonja to my cosplay list. Number 8, Venom. Spider-Man and one of top arch nemesis Venom have teamed up on more than one occasion throughout their history. But when I think of Venom and Spider-Man working side by side, I always think of Carnage. Another point that makes this team up so next level crazy. Carnage is a favorite among the symbiote fans, an offspring of the Venom symbiote that attaches itself to famed serial killer Cletus Cassidy. And you can find this showdown in the Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 from issues 361 to 363, titled Carnage, Part 1, 2, and 3 respectively. The other thing I love about this team up is that it involves the Human Torch, and later the entire Fantastic Four team, who are called upon to help control Venom. Oh, And also when Spider-Man and the Human Torch go to recruit Eddie Brock to help them stop Carnage, Venom almost drowns Johnny Storm. It is for this reason, if you're going to read only one of the 3-part story, I recommend issue 362. Did I also mention that this team up also appears in the 1994 Spider-Man animated series, where the two reluctantly join forces to take down Carnage and Baron Mordo and stop Dormammu. Number 7. Man-Wolf and Frankenstein. For those of you who don't know who Man-Wolf is, he's like a werewolf from outer space. Yeah, that's right. He also just happens to be former astronaut John Jameson, son of Jonah Jameson. In Marvel Team Up Volume 1 issue 37, we see Spider-Man coming together with Man-Wolf and Frankenstein to escape the clutches of an evil mad scientist, the Monster Maker, and stop his dastardly plot. This story is a fun one, especially if you are a classic monster movie fan like myself. Number 6. Wolverine. For this team up, there are a few different places we could take you, but I'd like to take you to a short comic series called Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine. In this little 6-issue series, we get to see these two very different superheroes team up after just getting caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The two showed up to stop a bank robbery, only to have some time-traveling diamonds blast them millions of years back to the past. It's cute, entertaining, well drawn, and well colored. And if you don't believe me, I highly recommend checking it out for yourself. One of the things I love most about this team up is how well Wolverine and Spider-Man both clash and complement one another, and the interlacing of both darkly serious and light comedic writing. Number 5. Spider-Man and Spider-Man and Spider-Man. You know, I can't do a Spider-Man list without touching on the Spider-Verse, and more specifically, the film Into the Spider-Verse. One of my favorite storylines within this Spider-Man comic, Spider-Geddon, involves the exploration of alternate Spider-Mans. I love how much the storyline has come to embrace the idea of multiple spider people, or spider totems as they are often referred. All of these team-ups are linked by the idea that there are an unlimited number of universes, all connected by spider totems, different versions of Spider-Man, who are stationed in their own universe and are responsible for protecting it. Great threats to the multiverse, however, often require our alternates to take part in mass level team-ups in the comics. If you are more a fan of the Marvel Cinematic world, you will perhaps be more experienced with the very loose adaptation of the Spider-Verse storyline, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was released in 2018, and experienced much critical and financial success. And if you aren't familiar with this film, like, you need to be. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. Number 4. Deadpool. On the opposite team-up side of Wolverine, we have Deadpool, who has a similar writing style to Spider-Man, though much more of his material could be considered more adult or crude. Not only have these two teamed up multiple times, and both have been Avengers, but they also have their own entire series together. And it's hilarious, as you may have already predicted. Spider-Man / Deadpool tells the story of Deadpool seeking out Spider-Man's help and confessing that Spider-Man has always been a role model. Cute. Eventually, Wade wins Spider-Man over despite the fact that Spider-Man does seem to often get annoyed by Deadpool's antics. The two take down all sorts of villains, including the first semi-big bad, Patient Zero, and complete all kinds of heroic acts together, including, but not limited to, saving Christmas. Number 3. Cast of SNL. I could explain this comic in full to you all, but I kind of feel like it would ruin it. This team up comes to us from the Marvel Team Up series Volume 1 issue 74. In that issue, you can see the cast of SNL as hosted by none other than Stan Lee team up with Spider-Man to fight some samurai. Yep, it is the epitome of everything that is super 70s in the comics, neatly wrapped up in one issue. The only thing that makes me sad about this team up is that we didn't get more of it. Number 2. Mysterio. In the newest Spider-Man film Far From Home, we will be seeing Mysterio team up with Spider-Man. And if the trailers are to be believed, we will also see Mysterio be welcomed into the Avengers. This isn't the first time villain and hero have teamed up. We also see the two team up to defeat Doc Ock in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 issue 686. Mysterio is probably one of the most iconic Spider-Man villains, an illusionist and trickster who often cannot be trusted. Okay, so there are two ways this team up could end in Far From Home. Number 1. Mysterio is retconned as a superhero in the film who maybe later turns villain, but you know, not yet. Or number 2. Mysterio is teaming up with Spider-Man simply to betray him. While Mysterio's motives are yet unclear, it is almost certainly guaranteed that Far From Home will at least allow us to see these two fight side by side at some point, granting us at least a small amount of team-up time for these two heroes. Number 1. Superman. Okay, so yes, while this DC and Marvel crossover is titled Superman vs. The Amazing Spider-Man, by the end of the comic the two are on the same page. And I had to include it because, like most of us, I do enjoy a good DC Marvel crossover every now and then. This one-off involves Lex Luthor and Doc Ock teaming up to pit the two heroes against each other, though in the end Spider-Man and Superman join forces to save their lady loves Lois Lane and MJ, who have been kidnapped by the villains. And of course, they prevail, save the day, and end up as buds. Number 10. Deadpool, Wolverine, and Captain America. The Marvel storyline The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is a part of one of the Deadpool series, sees the three powerhouses team up. The series mainly follows Deadpool, who approaches the fellow heroes, looking to team up as he thinks someone is targeting Weapons Plus alumni. The other two heroes refuse to join him, which leads to him being captured by a villain who goes by the name Butler. He escapes to discover a group of alternate X-Men made from Deadpool's organs and other regenerated X-Men bits, and sort of Deadpool's regeneration ability, like holding them together. With the help of them and Captain America and Wolverine, who Wade also finds out were kidnapped by the Butler as well, he defeats the villain. Unfortunately, his daughter and her mother Carmelita were also kidnapped by the Butler and perished before Deadpool and the rest of the team could save them. This time they actually ruined everything as a team in Deadpool's instance. He lost his family as a result of the fact that Cap and Wolverine just didn't join him soon enough. Number 9. Wolverine and Spider-Man. Yeah, there are certain superheroes who just kinda make bad teammates, and Wolverine is kind of one of those superheroes. Spider-Man isn't usually, but there are certain people he just really doesn't get along with well. Of course, their differences have also made them a strong team, as these two do tend to team up quite a bit in the comics. But I'm specifically talking about a time when they swapped bodies. One, this team up is also just awful in regards to the storyline. It happens in Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1 when Jean Grey gets mad at Logan for hitting on her and causes him and Peter Parker to swap bodies by using her powers, which seems a little severe and kind of unfair to Peter. The two damage one another's bodies somewhat, but the end of this comic issue is what is truly terrifying. The swap ends with the horrifying implication that Wolverine tried to sleep with teenage MJ while in Peter's body. Ugh, that's really gross. Number 8. Batman, Hellboy, and Starman. Yeah, you're probably wondering what is going on with this one. This crossover happened in the late 90s and is a two-part short series that actually has a really awesome story, but was also kind of oddly done. It's a little spooky trade-off series revolving around Hellboy taking down a neo-Nazi group. In part 1, he works with Batman to save Ted Knight from the neo-Nazi group called Knights of October. But then in part 2, as Starman is joining the group once he's saved, Batman reveals that he has to dip to go deal with some Joker stuff back in Gotham. So then Batman leaves and sends Starman and Hellboy on a private jet to the Amazon rainforest, where they work to track down the leader of the villainous group who managed to escape in the original tussle of part 1. And the two then also have to take on a demon in typical Hellboy fashion. This spooky team up is almost ruined by the weird swap out of our heroes. Seems like Batman just wasn't feeling the part 2 of this crossover, or maybe just wasn't feeling working with Starman? Makes me wonder if he really did have business to attend to, or if he just wanted out of the team up. Number 7. Punisher and Archie. Yes, this really happened. This team up sounds like it was a terrible idea, but it actually sold fairly well, despite most people thinking it was a joke when it was announced. The Punisher is employed by the government to hunt and capture, not kill, Red, a drug dealer who looks similar to Archie. Red escapes the Punisher and attempts to lie low in Riverdale, where he uses his legitimate business connections to finagle his way into Hiram Lodge's mansion. The Punisher tracks Red down to Riverdale and thinks he spots him in an ice cream shop, but he's really spotting Archie and Jughead. However, Punisher's team isn't the only one tracking Red. Another group is also tracking him, one that is comprised of thugs who aim to kill Red before he can be caught and potentially snitch out the rest of the operation. They kidnap Archie and Jughead before Punisher can get to them. Meanwhile, Veronica takes Red on a date to the school dance in an attempt to make Archie jealous. Eventually things all work out and Punisher figures out who the real Red is, and even thinks Riverdale is pretty nice and that Archie is a pretty alright kid. He leaves with his bounty and a gift from Miss Grundy, I don't know, and later gets to resume his violent ways. And Archie goes back to his wholesome life. Well, sort of. Because now we have the show Riverdale, which definitely paints the town of Riverdale more in the vein of what Punisher originally expected. Number 6. Venom and Hulk. The Incredible Hulk vs. Venom is a bizarre but fantastic one-shot that imagines what would happen if these two terrifying heroes teamed up. While the time period it comes out of makes you question Venom's capacity for heroics, in this comic he is seen trying to heroically save people in the aftermath of an earthquake. During this he runs into the Hulk, who fights him thinking he's a villain. This version of the Hulk is also oddly well spoken. Eventually the two realize they are both after the same guy, Dr. Bad Vibes, who was claiming to be behind the earthquakes. They team up to take him down, but find out that the earthquake was a result of natural causes, and that Dr. Bad Vibes is just a crazy guy with an earthquake button who thinks that it works. The idea of these two coming after you is pretty terrifying. They almost don't decide to work together, but I'm glad they do, because this matchup is oddly delightful. Number 5. Sentry and the Dark Avengers. Okay, granted Sentry is a part of Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers, but he's probably the only member that you could, outside of the Dark Avengers, consider a hero when it comes to the assembly of this once villainous team. What's more scary than Sentry on a regular hero day? Sentry under the control of Norman Osborn. Sentry, when he joined the Dark Avengers, believed he was guilty for the death of his wife, and because of this, his moral compass is somewhat misaligned and off-kilter. He doesn't really see anything he's doing is wrong, and tries to be a hero during these dark times. However, as many heroic deeds as the Dark Avengers try to accomplish, the way they go about things is often what makes them scary, and is what sometimes makes them actually unable to accomplish the true heroics that the original team of Avengers often successfully completed. Number 4. Iron Man, Black Panther, and sort of Batman. This team up originally sounds awesome in principle, but it was part of a dreadful series called Marvel that was the result of a competition between Bill Jamaas, John Casada, and Peter David as to who could sell more issues. This series was Bill Jamaas' entry. In issue 2, he puts these 3 heroes together who assemble to stop kids from handing out money. Obviously Batman isn't really there, as Bill Jamaas did not get DC's permission, but the character looks a lot like Batman and talks about his dead parents, so yeah. The victims in the comic, that is the bystanders accepting money that is being donated to them, berate the heroes for being rich and selfish. The heroes respond by violently beating them up and killing them. Iron Man even uses his repulsor beams to just straight up obliterate someone upon arriving at the scene. Goodness. If that isn't terrifying, I don't know what is. Number 3. Old Man Logan and Hawkeye. During the Old Man Logan storyline in the 2008 Wolverine series, we see Old Man, Hawkeye, and Logan team up. Logan is hired by now blind Hawkeye to help him make a delivery across the futuristic wasteland. Despite being blind, it seems like Hawkeye has developed a Raider-like sight, similar to Daredevil, making him still a crack shot and still able to even drive. Wow. The two come up against all sort of supervillains, including a T-Rex from the Savage Lands that is bonded with the Venom symbiote. Yet, still, this deadly duo doesn't quite get everything right in the end. It turns out the delivery Hawkeye is aiming to make is 99 vials of super soldier serum in a now grossly unsuper world. He is supposed to be delivering the vials to someone who wants to create a new team of Avengers, but he gets double-crossed and murdered in the process, and almost gets Logan killed too. Whoa. Number 2. Eminem and Punisher. While I was actually kind of excited when I first heard about this team up, I was unfortunately let down by it. Eminem is a huge superhero fan, in case you didn't know, so seeing him team up with the Punisher could be interesting and awe-inspiring. The standalone team-up series was originally slated to be a 2-parter, but it ended up just being a 1 issue, probably as a result of it being kind of a letdown. The duo are terrifying together and spend part of the comic beating up on one another, despite being on the same side. Punisher is there to protect Mathers from Barracuda, Eminem's old friend and apparently a contract killer who is trying to complete a hit on Mathers. The fight ends with them out on a frozen lake. Eminem gets away, manages to borrow a chainsaw from a fan who is ice fishing, and comes back to save Punisher, who is getting his butt kicked by Barracuda. The comic ends with Punisher turning on Eminem for trying to kill him, but he only shoots around him, putting him on like a floating iceberg and just tossing him a satellite phone, calling Marshall a criminal for killing Barracuda and trying to kill him, but then saying that they're even. What a weird one-shot. Number 1. Spawn and Batman. Oh my goodness, I wish there was more than one issue of this fantastically dark duo. These two heroes meet up in New York where Batman is tracking an arsenal of robots who are built to use human brains as their own, as well as a ton of weapons. He runs into Spawn and the two fight one another, suspicious of each other, almost eliminating the other hero in the process. Eventually though, they realize they're on the same side and team up to stop the robots. One thing I really love about this team up is the way Batman is drawn. Todd McFarlane draws the iconic Spawn style artistry in the issue, and Frank Miller is behind the writing helm for this one. It truly is a dark, gritty, gruesome little one-shot.
Starting us off in at number 10, Spider-Man and Zatanna. This team up occurred in a Marvel team up comic. We're talking Marvel team up issue 81 from 1979. We're talking Marvel team up issue 81 from 1979. It saw Peter Parker's web-slinger teaming up with the daughter of Satan, Zatanna. Creative name there, Satan. Not self-involved whatsoever. Anywho, this story, titled Last Rites, Doctor Strange finds himself manipulated by the Shiatra Book of the Damned, causing him to become an agent of Basilisk, turning him into a werewolf. Spider-Man has to track him down, and Zatanna gets involved, with her mission being to restore Doctor Strange's soul to normal or kill him as a last resort if she fails. By the end of the team-up, Zatanna is faced with a choice to either save her own life or save Strange's soul, and she ends up going with the Doctor's, which actually went over pretty well with fans because she wasn't a super overly popular character. And at number 9, the Micronauts and Baron Kaza. This one is kind of weird. It's a team up between the Micronauts and Baron Kaza. Kaza is kind of like a cross between an evil knight, Darth Vader, and a sad Doctor Doom impersonator. He's the former royal chief scientist of Homeworld, who used his technology to overthrow the monarchy of Homeworld, taking control of a large chunk of the microverse before his archenemies, the Micronauts, defeated him. Here we see an instance where they were on the same side though. And their foe? Professor Charles Xavier. The team-up took place during the X-Men Micronauts crossover series, with the unlikely coupling leading Kaza's fleet against a seemingly all-powerful entity. Turns out that this mysterious entity's power is traced to Charles Xavier. Spoiler alert, it's his dark side. And when they track him down at the X-Mansion, eventually this entity turns the mutants against the Micronauts, apparently kills a bunch of people, and Kitty Pryde and Kaza sort of accidentally switch bodies. Things get weirder and devolve into the entity trying to rape Kitty, who is actually Kaza, and this evil Xavier entity gets pervy with Danielle Moonstar to the point where he's actually psychically fondling her. Like, not even joking. The story ends with Xavier being the one who kills off the entity, although claims that the darkness inside of each of us is never fully gone, even when defeated. Ooh. Can we just talk about how an aspect of Xavier's personality just got real evil and pervy, and everyone was like totally cool with that, with him being like, I fixed it, don't worry guys, but it's still there deep down. Like, how are the X-Men not being like, yo, this is kind of Moving on to number 8, Doctor Doom and Namor. Namor, despite having quite antagonistic qualities, definitely qualifies as an anti-hero, so it should be no surprise that he was the hero side of this very first team-up in Marvel's Supervillain Team-Up Volume 1, Issue 1. The story starts with Namor getting huffy and calling off their alliance, and then Doom moping around about it and being all like, I don't need a lackey, I need a friend. So he decides that he's going to try to recruit Namor one more time to convince him otherwise, but he's super sketch about it. He ends up using a tracking device disguised as a fish to follow Namor, because that's totally a way to rebuild the trust of an ally who just abandoned you. Despite this, they team up again and all is going fine and dandy until Namor witnesses Doom executing one of Atoma's defenseless lackeys in Supervillain Team Up Issue 3, causing the two of them to get into a big brawl in Supervillain Team Up Issue 4. Sometimes you just gotta reel it in a bit, Victor. Come on dude, just take a step back. Don't be weird about it. And at number 7, Adam Warlock and Thanos. Adam Warlock and Thanos have had a long-running history of being adversaries, but once upon a time the two actually worked together. In his earlier spacefaring days, Adam would come across the Universal Church of Truth, an intergalactic religious organization led by a villain named Magus. Teaming up with Pip the Troll, Gamora, and her adoptive papa Thanos, the group opposed Magus, and then discovered that Magus is actually a future version of Warlock who had traveled back in time and was forced insane by the use of his soul gem. With the Mad Titan's help, he travels into the future and steals his own soul in an attempt to prevent his evil self from ever existing, effectively killing himself. It wasn't until after all that Warlock and Thanos would clash, with Thanos getting his mitts on the other Infinity Gems to cause havoc. Moving on to number 6, Dracula and the X-Men. Dracula has a peculiar history with the members of the X-Men in both the 616 and alternate realities. In the 616 continuity, despite having an unruly past together, the mutant team and the infamous Vamp team up in order to restore the world of vampires in Curse of the Mutants. a storyline that took place between 2010 and 2011. Blade was there too. Essentially, they were forced to work together when Dracula's irritable son, Zarus, engineered a biological weapon that converted regular humans into vampires on a large scale. While no one died permanently, Jubilee technically died and became a child of the night, having been turned into a vampire during one of Zarus' attacks. Dracula hooked her up with an amulet to help her manage sunlight as a thank you gesture for the X-Men's help, and thus began a very strange period in Jubilee's narratives. Side note, she was eventually cured for vampirism, but it was a weird stage. Moving on to number 5, Hank Pym and Ultron. Oh, Hank. Oh, Hank. Come on, Hank. Hank Pym has had it rough. Most recently, he was manipulated by Ultron, appearing to have merged with the robot after the Rage of Ultron storyline. At first, it seemed as if it was a mutual decision, but as the story went on, it became clear that Ultron was calling the shots and doing the driving, so to speak. It just seems that Hank can never truly control his creation, and his weird feelings of sentimentality towards his robotic son will always result in his downfall some way. The whole thing ended with Hank getting his soul devoured by a demonic entity that lives inside of the Soul Stone in Soul World, seemingly killing him. But we're pretty sure that he'll be back, and hopefully not just as a sentient robot skin jacket. Moving on to number 4, Galactus and Cosmic Ghost Rider. Frank Castle's Cosmic Ghost Rider hails from an alternate universe in which Thanos had won and killed off all of Earth's heroes. Now during that battle, Frank Castle hits his head via debris from the Hulk smashing into a building. He dies. He ends up in Hell, where he makes a deal with Mephisto to return, making him into Ghost Rider, but when he arrived back on Earth it was too late. Thanos was gone. He roamed the desolate planet and eventually encountered Galactus, who had come to conflict with Thanos. Castle would offer the World Devourer his services and become his herald, becoming the Cosmic Ghost Rider, or more simply, the Rider. They would travel the galaxy together for centuries in an attempt to stop Thanos' quest to kill every living being in the universe, but eventually Thanos confronted them and beheaded Galactus, then offered Castle another option. If he was the Mad Titan's servant instead, he could punish more evil than he'd ever imagined. There's more to the story from there, of course, but in terms of his relationship with Galactus, their partnership ended when the mighty entity's death occurred. Moving on to number 3, Avengers and Kang the Conqueror. This team up is slightly different than the others on our list. It involves trying to resurrect a character via a team up and then trying to kill one half of said team up unsuccessfully. Once upon a time, Kang the Conqueror teamed up with Earth's mightiest heroes, and it resulted in the death of the woman he loved. Or rather, she kinda just remained dead because they had previously kind of been responsible for her death and he was really sore about it, sort of. So in the Avengers issue 69, Kang goes to the Avengers and informs them that the Grandmaster has put him in a precarious position. If the Avengers can defeat the Grandmaster's champions, the Squadron Sinister, he'll give Kang the power of life over death, to resurrect Ravonna, Kang's love. Now for context, Ravonna was killed off prior when the Avengers and Kang clashed, having sacrificed herself in order to prevent Kang from being killed by a traitor. Now in this story, the Avengers won, but Kang gets foolish and uses his power to try to kill the Avengers instead, and fails to do so, meaning he just kinda has to relive the pain of his love being dead again because he failed and it's his fault she's not alive this time. It's all very sad. And at number 2, Charles Xavier and Magneto in Dawn of X. Here's a case in which a team up effectively led to the fate of a character being worse than death. The new Dawn of X reboot of the X-Men franchise now sees Charles Xavier and his X-Men having had enough. They're done relying on the hope that humanity can learn to accept mutant kind, done with the oppression that they've dealt with for decades. Xavier ends up teaming up with Magneto, with the two of them primarily calling the shots with the new mutant sovereign nation that exists on Krakoa. This new sovereign state demands that mutants who have committed crimes are accountable by their mutant laws versus human laws out in the regular world, with one of these mutant laws being that they do not kill other mutants. Enter Sabretooth, who has been up to no good and is apprehended by the Fantastic Four outside of Krakoa. Cyclops shows up to take him to Krakoa for the mutants there to be the ones to decide his punishment. When Cyclops takes him over there, Xavier exiles Sabretooth, sending him into what he calls a stasis, deep inside of Krakoa. The ground opened up and Creed was dropped into it. Xavier claims that he'll be in there forever. I quote, "because that is how long mutant justice lasts." While he does note that Sabretooth might one day have the option to redeem himself, his fate is worse than any prison or death. To forever fall through the dark depths of a sentient creature for all of eternity? Yeah, yikes. That's like kinda savage, Xavier. You tolerate that, but you don't tolerate prisons? And finally, in at number 1, everybody during Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths is one of the most prominent crossovers in DC history, and an impactful one to boot. Essentially, the purpose of this crossover was to reboot the DC multiverse and create a single unified DC universe. The story itself involved everyone in DC's roster, for the most part, getting involved to prevent the Anti-Monitor from completely destroying the multiverse. The Monitor, his good counterpart, tries to recruit heroes from across the multiverse to help, but is murdered. And then Brainiac tries to take advantage of the situation, but ultimately, in the end, all of the heroes and all of the villains are brought together by the Spectre to work together. Crisis is known for its surprisingly high death toll, killing off the likes of heroes such as Kara Zor-El and Barry Allen, along with hundreds of other lives that were lost in the process before Antimatter was defeated.
Number 10. Spider-Man and SNL. In Marvel Team-Up number 74, Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson went to watch a taping of Saturday Night Live. John Belushi is playing his samurai character and ends up getting his hands on Silver Samurai's ring. When Silver Samurai comes to get his ring, Spidey has to help John Belushi and the other not ready for primetime players battle against Silver Samurai and his crew. The SNL cast puts up a pretty good fight, dressed as heroes like Miss Marvel and Thor, and eventually the day is saved. This actually would have been a pretty amazing sketch, especially since that cast was one of the best SNL casts ever. Number 9. Batman and Sherlock Holmes. This one actually made quite a bit of sense. Two of the world's greatest detectives working together in one mysterious comic. When a descendant of the infamous Moriarty starts causing trouble, Batman turns to none other than Sherlock Holmes for help. But the unlikely thing is that this actually took place in modern day while Holmes was alive in the 1800s. But it's okay because they had a super plausible explanation for his long life. A distillation of royal jelly from bees and the rarefied atmosphere of Tibet. Sounds legit. Number 8. Batman and Spider-Man. So this is one of the more likely on this list since at least both characters are superheroes, but it's still a pretty weird combination. Not only are they from different universes, with Batman being DC and Spider-Man being Marvel, but they have totally different personalities. Batman is the stoic, silent defender of the night, while Spider-Man is the wisecracking young kid who loves to make dumb jokes. In the same issue, we saw Joker and Carnage getting along splendidly, which I suppose isn't much of a surprise. A lot of people didn't like this, but I thought the Abbott and Costello relationship that Bats and Spidey had was pretty funny. Number 7. Superman and the Quick Bunny. Okay, this one was just the worst. While this may seem like just some clever ad for Nesquik, it was actually a freaking terrible ad for Nesquik. Seriously, they managed to ruin Superman and Nesquik in one short comic. Superman faces up against Weather Wizard and for some reason can't handle it alone and needs help from the little bunny. Then they have a chocolate milk drinking contest and Superman can't even win that. The only good thing about this comic is it reminded me of all those awesome Nesquik commercials from the 90s. Remember when he threw his cue into the pool and it turned to chocolate? Those were the days. Number 6. Superman and Bugs Bunny. Yep, turns out Soups has a thing for rabbits. In this 4-part series, we saw a bunch of heroes working alongside Looney Tunes characters. After Mixie's Pitlick and Yo-Yo the Dodo brought the two worlds together. To make matters worse, and at the same time way better, the characters had their personalities mixed up too. Seeing the Flash and Roadrunner running their butts off and Daffy Duck acting like Batman, so basically Darkwing Duck, was just amazing. Number 5. Archie and the Punisher. In one issue of Archie, the Punisher came to town hunting a criminal who looked much like Archie. But then the Punisher meets Archie and realizes that he's straight up the most wholesome person ever and doesn't harm him. This was actually a pretty decent one since it took place in Archie comics. The absurd and lighthearted atmosphere that generally comes from these crossovers worked pretty well. Number 4. Batman and the Ninja Turtles. In the 6-issue series Batman / Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we see, well, Batman meeting the Ninja Turtles. The Turtles and Shredder find themselves transported to Gotham City, coming across Batman and a number of villains as they try to find their way back home. They have pretty weird chemistry, kinda like Batman and Spider-Man, but 4 of them. And Batman even chastises Michelangelo for chewing with his mouth open. As good as Splinter is at teaching martial arts, he clearly slacked on teaching them manners. I think it's time for Bruce to pick up 4 new wards. Number 3. The Sonic Gang and a bunch of inappropriate Image characters. In Archie Adventure Series number 7, Sonic Super Special, we saw the Sonic Gang team up with a cast of characters from Image Comics. This was super weird, but pretty cool, seeing the Sonic characters battling it up with some pretty cool Image characters like Shadowhawk and Savage Dragon. It wasn't the most fitting combination because the Image characters are a little more adult than the Sonic ones, but the worst part is that Spawn was barely in it. Even though he was on the cover and is probably Image Comics' most famous character, he was just in one panel saying no, and then bailing. It's like Image Comics could only afford him for one quick cameo scene, but like Spawn isn't some famous actor who's super busy. You can draw him all you want. They didn't even include him in the final fight. So lame, and it had such potential. Number 2, X-Men and Star Trek. This was another of the comics that as a comic was pretty mediocre, but the fact that it was Star Trek and X-Men all in one comic made it just amazing. Now, I know what you're thinking. This must have been done because Patrick Stewart was in both X-Men and Star Trek. Well, sadly this comic was released in 1996. 1976, 4 years before Stewart played Professor X on screen. So they missed what would have been a pretty hilarious opportunity. The comic did still have its moments though, my favorite being when Spock knocks out Wolverine with a Vulcan nerve pinch. Yeah, give it a read if you're a fan of the two franchises, just don't expect literary gold. Number 1. The Punisher and Eminem. In a one-off Punisher comic in 2009, we saw Eminem added to the mix, at first fighting against the Punisher until he realizes that Castle had come to protect him. Because apparently Barracuda, another artist with whom Eminem grew up, was hired by the frickin' Parents Music Council to kill Eminem. Yeah, that's the trick. This guy's promoting violence to our kids, so we're gonna kill him. Honestly, the comic itself was pretty awful. Eminem's animation stuck out like a sore thumb for some reason, and somehow he managed to pistol whip Punisher and knock him out. But it was still pretty epic to see Eminem and the Punisher in a comic together. Yeah, was this done mostly to hype up his new album? Definitely. Does that make it less amazing? Not even a little.
Number 10. Mockingbird. In this story from 1980, Spider-Man heads off to Los Angeles and has a run-in with Mockingbird, as well as Nick Fury. This issue fleshes out a lot of the world of S.H.I.E.L.D. and features some stuff that comes up in the movie Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This is far from the weirdest choice on the list, but still has a lot of really weird moments, like Spider-Man pulling a guy from a flying car and tossing him to the street 20 feet below. It's a pretty fun issue, with a lot of great moments with the aforementioned flying car, and Mockingbird kicking some real butt with her battle staves. It's S.H.I.E.L.D. versus Mockingbird, with Spider-Man sort of caught in the middle. He doesn't even like being in LA. Thankfully, things work out for Mockingbird in the end, and she survives getting totally blasted by S.H.I.E.L.D. She actually has quite a career with Marvel, getting her own comic series in 2016, and was even voted number 48 out of 50 in IGN's top 50 Avengers. She barely made the list, just like this list. Number 9. Ghost Rider. Now these two definitely make for an unusual pairing. I feel like Ghost Rider with his penance stare is pretty much the furthest possible thing from the tongue-lashing Spidey dishes out with the endless quips and puns. In this story, called If an Eye Offend Thee, our dynamic duo goes up against Orb, a mysterious villain with a giant eyeball for a head. Peter Parker and MJ see a billboard advertising Ghost Rider's latest stunt show and decide to come and watch, blow off some steam, you know? Pete is really impressed by Ghost Rider's makeup, not suspecting he's actually possessed by a demon. During the show, Orb shows up and entrances the guards and the crowd just by looking at them with his giant eyeball, then attempts to kidnap Ghost Rider's girlfriend Roxanne. Ghost Rider is unable to catch Orb as he uses his hypnosis to make audience members walk in front of the Ghost Rider, causing him to wipe out on his cycle. In the stunning conclusion, they leap out of the way of a train, Ghost Rider and Spider-Man, but Orb is not so lucky and totally gets hit. However, when they search the scene afterwards, they fail to locate Orb's body. Finally, Spider-Man swings off into the night, a bit disturbed by Ghost Rider's comment that he's not wearing a mask or makeup. Number 8. The Werewolf by Night. In this issue, Spidey is on the move again, this time to San Francisco on an assignment for the Daily Bugle. Exploring the Golden Gate Bridge, he barely reacts in time when the werewolf leaps out from a hiding place and attacks. Spidey stops the both of them from falling to their deaths with a quick bit of webbing action, and then tosses Werewolf off of the bridge into the water. The end. I'm just kidding. Werewolf does appear again later, but during the encounter the sun rises and Peter witnesses him changing back into his human form, Jack Russell. Spidey decides to help Jack, and before long he's confronting Moondark in a theater, taking him down and helping the werewolf to return to normal, no longer under Moondark's influence. Spidey does a lot of monologuing in this issue, recounting the recent death of Gwen Stacy and other recent events in his run. Also neat fact, Spidey's adventures in San Francisco continue along in the next Daredevil, issue 103, where those two meet up and team up against Ramrod. Black Widow is actually in that episode too. Team ups. Number 7. Red Sonja. Spider-Man and Red Sonja actually had an exciting romantically charged adventure recently across 5 issues in 2007, but I'm talking about their first encounter in Marvel Team-Up number 79 from 1979 called Sword of the She-Devil. Red Sonja first appeared as a character in Conan the Barbarian, but she went on to have her very own popular series and even a movie in the 80s. In this epic issue, we see worlds collide as Mary Jane transforms into Red Sonja. Red Sonja fights along Spider-Man Spider-Man against an evil sorcerer. The writers cleverly use a museum and some ancient artifacts to connect Sonya's world to the modern-day New York home of Spider-Man. It's pretty epic seeing the combination of fantasy monsters and swords mixed with the classic Spider-Man quipping and web-slinging. I'm sure fans who liked both comics at the time really enjoyed this crossover. In the end, Red Sonja transforms back into MJ on page 19, revealing that she was only possessed. It's one of the few examples where possession isn't necessarily a bad thing. Spidey would have had a hard time taking on this foe by himself. Number 6. Frankenstein's monster. This issue was definitely an attempt to boost sales and create more support for Marvel's Frankenstein character, whose run started in 1973. During this story, Frankenstein recaps his origin from Frankenstein issue number 1, and he talks a bit about his battles against Dracula in issues 7 through 11. So basically in the issue, Spider-Man gets blasted with a ray beam while he's trying to stop a robbery and inexplicably wakes up on a table next to Frankenstein. They escape from this castle and find themselves in the mountains and later rescue Judith Klemmer, an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., on an assignment to stop the monster maker Von Schucht, who plans to rule the world with an army of monsters. Classic. Spidey and Judith sneak in the back of his castle while Frankenstein just busts in the front door, beating the crap out of anybody who opposes him. When Frankenstein finally walks into the main chamber, he sees the monster maker releasing another prisoner against Spidey and Judith, the Man-Wolf. The story is continued in issue number 37, but I'll leave that for you to discover on your own. Number 5. Dr. Doom. I know, right? How could Spidey possibly end up on the same side as the nefarious Victor Von Doom? We actually also see Vision and Scarlet Witch in this crazy crossover. A mystical being called the Dark Rider is attempting to steal Dr. Doom's magical energies, but Spider-Man and Vision attack him together. He uses his powers to make a cat grow to a humongous size, and the heroes are kept busy battling it until Scarlet Witch hits it with a hex bolt, returning the cat to its normal size. Unfortunately, all this magic usage only strengthens the Dark Rider's power, and as Spider-Man and Vision watch on, Scarlet Witch realizes they'll have to help Dr. Doom in order to stop their common foe. They have an epic showdown, and Scarlet Witch stuns the Rider, but then he breaks free and incapacitates Doom and the Witch, leaving none to stand in his way. In the next issue, Marvel Team Up number 44, there's a stunning conclusion where Moondragon also joins the party. It's a whole crazy host of heroes. These team-ups are a lot of fun, and they were also a great marketing tool for Marvel back in the day. Number 4. Howard the Duck. A lot of these entries are from the Marvel Team Up series, but this next one is actually from 1996 during the Clone Saga event when Marvel had a run of Spider-Man team-ups. In this comic, we're actually treated to 2 fantastic team-ups, the first being Spider-Man and Gambit, but it's actually Spider-Man alongside Howard the Duck that I found really strange. This story crosses over with a Savage Dragon Destroyer Duck story that was in publication by Image Comics at the time. Peter Parker can hardly believe it when he overhears some bystanders say a recent robbery was committed by 2 men dressed as turtles in spacesuits. But it's really happening in this crazy crossover that incorporates the world of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Funny enough, there is actually still debate surrounding whether or not the version of Howard the Duck from this comic is canon, with some people arguing that this version of Howard is a clone and actually exists separately from the Image Comics universe. Man, it's Clone Saga, am I right? Number 3, not ready for primetime players. In this absolutely unexpected team up, Peter and Mary Jane happen to somehow have tickets to Saturday Night Live. A mysterious, powerful ring was given to a member of the cast, and the Silver Samurai has come to infiltrate the show and try to steal the ring back. We get to see John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and even Lorne Michaels as things unfold backstage in the dressing rooms, and Stan Lee is the host of SNL Tonight performing the opening monologue. Sounds like an episode of SNL I would actually want to watch. After a ton of wacky antics and drama, the samurai obtains his ring and disappears back to his own time, presumably. Luckily, the audience has no idea and thinks it was all part of the show. It turns out in the end that the ring was mailed to Belushi by mistake. It's honestly just one trope piled on top of another with a whole bunch of guest stars. So while it's not the most compelling story, it certainly makes for a very memorable comic book moment. Number 2. Aunt May and Franklin Richards. This crazy issue sees Spidey totally take the backseat while we go on a crazy escapade with Aunt May, the new Herald of Galactus. This issue opens with the death of Nova, and we see Galactus mourn the loss and contemplate what to do. He heads to Earth, hoping to ask Reed Richards for some help, but instead finds Franklin Richards at the circus with Peter and his Aunt May. He decides he's going to take Franklin to be his new herald, but Franklin uses his power to transfer the transformation energy from Galactus over to May Parker, transforming her into Golden Oldie, the Herald of Galactus. She's practically a sentient Twinkie in this paper-thin advertisement, but it still has a lot of heart. She collects all of the Twinkies on Earth to satiate Galactus, but it simply isn't enough, and eventually she finds an entire Twinkie planet, which Galactus promptly devours. Then May comes on back to Earth, and Pete wakes up at the end discovering it was all a dream. Then another person wakes up seeing that that was just a dream, and there's a few panels of that. It's a pretty funny ending to the whole comic. Number 1, Spider-Man and Ren and Stimpy. No doubt one of the weirdest crossovers I've seen, but it was still a fun one. It's Ren and Stimpy number 6, where Spider-Man shows up. He definitely gave them a boost because their run went on for 44 issues altogether. If you didn't know, Ren and Stimpy was a popular Nickelodeon show from the 90s that also had a Marvel Comics series. Spidey steps in to replace Powdered Toast Man, the beloved mascot of our duo's favorite breakfast cereal. Spidey reveals that he's just stepping in to temporarily fill the job, as Toast Man is currently being mind controlled by the evil Donut. The whole thing is full to the brim with puns and stuff. Toast Man hurling razor sharp bread like batarangs and being called a serial offender. Donut even has to boost his testosterone at one point to help take on Spider-Man. The whole thing is weird, it's wacky, and it's definitely worth checking out.